I think I realized I didn't want to spend my life inside of someone else's vision. I decided to start a farmer's market hummus stand at the Ithaca Farmers Market in order to get my arms around like some personal demons that I was battling. You were not walking by me without either having a sample or getting absolutely harassed. You couldn't make it better at home if you tried. Product's great. This guy's kind of crazy, but the growth is there. So if a batch isn't right, we throw it away. I do not want to be a professional fundraiser. Once you raise money, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Now you're on someone else's timeline, 24 hours at a time. The product is the entry fee, but it's not the whole game.
Hi, I'm Mike Gelb, and this is Consumer VC, where we talk about what it takes to invest in and build scalable consumer businesses. If you're enjoying the show, hit that subscribe button. It helps more folks discover these conversations, and sign up for the newsletter at theconsumervc.com. I send a weekly roundup of the latest consumer deals, trends, and product expansions. Plus, you'll get first access to new episodes. Today on the show, I am delighted to have Chris Kirby, who is the founder of Ithaca Hummus. Ithaca Hummus is a premium brand known for its super fresh, clean label approach to hummus. There's this saying I love, go slow to go fast. And when I think about that, I think about Chris and Ithaca's journey. They spent years thoughtfully expanding, moving slowly, but on purpose, until they were ready to hit the gas. And this year, they're on track to hit 50 million revenue for 2025, which is incredible. We're going to get into how they did it, also how they did it without raising traditional venture and raising private equity, and some of the strategies that help them grow on their own terms. But before we have Chris on and before we get into it, I want to tell you about our presenting sponsor, Highbeam. With Highbeam, you can get the credit you need to stay ahead. With tariffs rising and cash flow tighter than ever, Highbeam gives brands access to flexible credit lines and cards built around their cash cycle. For more information, check out highbeam.co. And lastly, a quick disclaimer before we get into it. All content on the show is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing here should be considered investment advice. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Here's Chris. Chris, thank you so much for your time. How are you doing?
I am doing great. It's a beautiful afternoon here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Doing awesome.
Love to hear it. It's also beautiful here in LA. I will be honest, I'm very lucky. It's usually pretty beautiful here in LA, but let's get into it. Why don't I start first, the early part of your career? I think the first 5-10 years or so, you were in the restaurant industry, if not mistaken. Why did you want to enter the restaurant industry? And is The Bear, if you've seen The Bear, anything like the real thing?
Okay. All right. So two-parter there. Okay. I got into the restaurant industry. I mean, it was my first job. You turn 14, 15, you start to want stuff, right? Like, I want that thing. So your parents are like, well, go get a job. And so a restaurant was just like where I could get hired. I got a job washing dishes at a local restaurant where I grew up. And, that was hot. It was loud. It was chaotic. But for some reason, that energy just spoke to me. So I also loved the way that in a restaurant, you're kind of exposed to all these different parts of a business, where if you work at a manufacturer or you work in sales, you kind of are only exposed to one silo of the company. Whereas in a restaurant, you see it all from purchasing, raw materials, manufacturing, if you will, sales, customer service, everything is right there for you. So, and I've always had this entrepreneurial itch. And I think I also liked what a restaurant did for me in that sense as well. So when I graduated high school, I just decided to keep rolling with it. I went to culinary school, and then I spent 5 or 6 years going or touring around the country, working in different fine dining restaurants. So, The Bear, honestly, painfully accurate, I have to say. The anxiety, that relentless pressure, the unspoken hierarchy that's going on in there, it really captures the emotional intensity of the back of the house better than anything I've ever seen. But I say painfully because they do a really good job, but they have to condense it down into these like hour-long episodes, so they like almost overdo it in some cases, which I'm a little bit of a critic of that, but overall I say it's pretty accurate.
That's good to know, and that sounds like hell. Sounds very, very tough and challenging. Um, why well, with that being said, why make why make for me, like, when I was a teenager, for me, it was camp counseling. That's what I did. So I didn't work at a restaurant. I just did, summer camp counseling, but, um, definitely probably could have, throughout the school year. Why make the transition going from the restaurant industry to hummus into the wonderful world and maybe equally painful world of CPG?
Yeah, it's just as painful. It's just not like every night, every weekend, every holiday, but everything else is, just as emotionally draining at times. But, I reached a point where professionally, I think I realized I didn't want to spend my life inside of someone else's vision. Um, and personally, the restaurant world is very difficult on a person, especially a person like me who's, I've struggled with alcohol abuse, drug and alcohol abuse my whole life, and I really needed to like step away from that in order to get my arms around like some personal demons that I was battling. So I did a full 180. I was living in Austin, Texas, and I decided to move back to Maryland in with my parents. I went to community college for 1 year, um, and studied, just business because at that point in time, I had an associate's degree in culinary arts. And then I started applying to like university schools. I got into the hotel school at Cornell, and I went to Ithaca and was just absolutely shocked to find that a town like Ithaca did not have a local hummus company. And I was 26, keep in mind, at this time, going back with kids who are, getting their bachelor's degree in undergrad. So I knew that I had to do something with my time besides like, you know, party and do things that the 18 to 21 year olds were doing. So I decided to start a farmers market hummus stand at the Ithaca Farmers Market.
Was part of the reason leaving the restaurant was just also the restaurant industry, was that also like a light because of the lifestyle as well? And like
Totally.
being late up, being up late and everything like that?
Absolutely. It was a lifestyle change that I needed. And I think when I first got into like cooking and culinary school and restaurants, my dream was to one day like own my own restaurant. But because of like how tough that was just for me personally as a human, I don't think I ever would have gotten there because I just was not in a good place.
Why did it shock you when you went to Ithaca that there was not a local hummus, there?
Ithaca is a town, a very small town in
Mhm.
upstate agricultural New York. It's got a bustling farmers market full of local food vendors and two major universities, a college and a university there. So it's a progressive town. It's an agricultural town. I haven't been to, I don't think, a single farmer's market since that didn't have a hummus stand. It's just like the, typical, like you would just expect to find that there, right? And so when I went on my first trip to the Ithaca Farmers Market, I was like, there's got to be a hummus company. It was kind of this idea I had in the back of my head because I knew I could start it without a lot of money. But I went there half expecting to find a hummus company, and when I didn't, I was like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm gonna do as a project while I'm in school.
Got it. And so talk to me about those first moments when it came to actually starting Ithaca. Did you first of all, I mean, I'd imagine because you were in Ithaca, that's where the name comes from. But talk to me a little bit about why how you actually got off the ground and actually started selling in in that farmer's market and actually being the only hummus brand in the farmer's market?
I did went through all the normal, you got to get a license and permitting. I had to find a kitchen. I've always been very scrappy. I found a kitchen that I rented for $250 a month. It was a summer camp that wasn't being used. It was like the perfect thing. Um, Packaging was just like deli cups and these plastic bands that were heat activated with like a hair dryer. I used ice cream scoops to like scoop the product out and weigh it on little scales, and then so I would go to school during the day, and then I would go to the kitchen at night, make hummus all week, and then on Saturdays and Sundays I would lug these massive coolers full of ice and hummus to the farmers market. And the key to those first initial few markets was to not let anyone pass by my stand without absolutely forcing them to try a sample. Like you were not walking by me without either having a sample or getting absolutely harassed. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. Because after a while, people would try it, word kind of got out. And after a few weeks, like I wasn't able to make enough any week to like make it through the entire market. I don't think ever.
What do you think was different about your hummus? Was it that people people had to say no really loudly or scream if they weren't going to try it because you pretty much were saying you have to try this hummus, and kind of and got people, everyone that to walk by? Do you think it was the salesmanship? That's what I'm trying to say. Do you think it was the actual flavors there that that people really kind of went for and were really impressed with?
There's no doubt that the salesmanship got them in the door, but once they came inside, the taste is what kept them.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I was making it like 2 miles away, and I was squeezing lemons by hand, and fresh peeled garlic. Like you couldn't make it better at home if you tried. And at that time, and still today, like you go to the grocery store and you buy hummus, and it's just this super underwhelming experience, in my opinion. And so that's what people had as a basis for comparison. And then they tried this product that I had made in a local kitchen, all fresh ingredients, freshly whipped up and fluffy. And they were like, wow, this is like totally changes my perception of what hummus should actually be like.
So when you started seeing that word were kind of spreading out, this was still like a side project. Just, hey, I'm a student. I'm gonna try this just as a way to maybe pay some of my bills, or even just just to kind of experiment and see. Was was there a point? I mean, obviously, I know there was a point, but talk to me a little bit about that shift in mindset, maybe that you had to do. That this is this is more of just like a side gig, or something I'm doing while in school, versus something that actually, okay, there's maybe a real opportunity here.
There's something very powerful about going to a farmer's market and standing there in front of thousands of people who just like pass their energy and excitement for something that you made onto you. Like it's a human to human thing. And it just filled me up with this electrifying energy that allowed me to do things that were almost like defied logic. Like I could just stay up and make this product all night and go to school the next. I felt like superhuman, and I didn't want that feeling to stop. So I was like, how do I? Maybe it's just the way that my messed up brain works, but I was like, how do I just like make sure this never stops and keep getting more and more and more of it? And the way to do that was to grow. And that was the growth process was just a one foot in front of the other, incremental. I went from the farmer's market to the local co-op to 20 local co-ops to a distributor and so on. We can talk about the growth more if you want to, but
Yeah.
um, it happened quickly. I don't even want to say it happened slow and then it happened fast. It just happened. Like I was there and it was like, okay, this is working. I don't want it to stop.
And why? Why Ithaca, the brand? Why call it Ithaca? I mean, I know that is where you were when you started the business, but why did it make sense to name it after a town?
Well, in some ways it doesn't, which you might be alluding to. I mean, I think if you pick up the book Branding for Dummies, like somewhere in the first chapter, it's like, do not name your brand after something that already has a meaning, like a town, because you're not going to be able to trademark that very easily. And so it was very difficult and is still a battle to get like all the full trademark rights that we would like to have as a brand for the word Ithaca in the hummus category. But I don't think I would do it any differently because it's become a part of our DNA. Um, and it's memorable, like I feel like, I don't know this, but if I had to guess, like 1 in 3 people that I meet have some connection to the town of Ithaca. Um, and when people ask the question that you're asking right now, it's like a perfect segue and gives us a chance to tell our story. So it's worked out, even though it's been challenging in some ways. I don't think I would do it any differently.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally understand why with that name, then you can dive into the story quite seamlessly because obviously that's where you started the business. Um, when you after you graduated Cornell, was the plan then, let's go full time with Ithaca Hummus? Or did you still kind of consider it, this is just kind of a side project. I'm gonna kind of see where this goes, but I want to have another job as well.
I did while I was in school. I did take an internship one summer out in Santa Monica at a restaurant called Veggie Grill. So if you may know it, yeah. If I mean, thinking back and like thinking that, like, I guess maybe I was still toying with the idea of like, well, what else could I do with? Because I knew that if I went all in on Ithaca, like this was it. Like I'm not going to go and have some other career that I never anticipated I could have before I got to Cornell because this was my chance to do that. But I certainly by the time I was ready to graduate, I knew that Ithaca was going to be my life.
Got it. No, that's awesome that you were able to afterwards then dive into it full time. Once you graduated and realized that Ithaca was the brand that you were building, the brand that was not a side gig, the brand that was the main event, how then how then did you approach scaling? I know that you talked about going into a co-op and then going to 20 co-ops and then getting a distributor. How did some of these like relationships come about? I'm sure they stemmed originally from the farmers market, but how did you kind of approach the early growth for Ithaca when it comes to getting into a, a lot more doors?
Well, I will say that we didn't grow doors very quickly. In the first 5 years, I think we were under 2,000 doors the whole time. Um,
Why
so
was and why was that?
I would say the biggest reason is because the product was so perishable. Like it was too big of a risk to take on some massive account and ship the product across the country because it only had, a 21-day shelf life at best. Um, so I was forced to figure out how to monetize the region that I was in, max out the monetization capacity of my region, right? Fancy way of saying like I needed to stay focused locally. And the way I did that initially was I went to see a local natural foods distributor. Um, and I asked them for a list of their top accounts in the region. And I said, I know that I'm not going to. You're going to lose money if you try to put my product on your truck and go out and sell it for me. You're not a sales organization. You're a distributor. You take products to places. But in order for me, that's my goal eventually. And in order for me to get to that point, I'm willing to go out and do the work and sell into all of the accounts that I would need in order for my product to make sense on your truck. So I started just by dialing down that list, getting in my car, going to visit, local food stores, co-ops, coffee shops, whatever, wineries, whatever it was in that region. And eventually I got like 20, 25 of them. And I went back to the distributor and I said, hey, here's what the monthly, revenue that you could make off our product looks like. And they started carrying Ithaca on their trucks. And then I would do ride alongs with their reps and go sell to all the other customers that I didn't hit initially, and just kind of built it like that.
So you weren't like using a broker. You were actually going out and doing the selling yourself, and then to the actual stores.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't. We didn't use a broker for probably the first 6 or 7 years.
Wow. Wow. What once you got in store, this is what I've heard is the toughest thing. It's not so much getting into the store. It's actually staying on shelf, and moving product and selling through. When you were getting in through, I know that you may have said you were kind of riding the trucks, doing the checks. I'd imagine. What was your strategy when it comes to selling through to make sure that your product stays on shelf, and as well as and to have the velocities that it needed?
Well, that was one of the advantages of being the founder and going out and selling these accounts personally, sitting down with the person who physically stocks that case and tasting the product with them and telling them my story, was that it armed them with the information that they needed to turn around and sell it to their customers. And we're also talking about retailers that are based in their community, co-ops, natural food stores. They have a lot of inherent trust built up with their customers. And so I was able to make one-on-one connections with a lot of these small retailers, and they were a big part in helping to tell the story and spread the word and the excitement about this new great product that they just got on their shelf. And they helped with, you know allowing people to taste it and telling the story. um Sampling has always been, we have always done as much sampling as we could afford and has made sense. Today we have 20 plus or minus brand ambassadors that work actually for Ithaca Hummus at any given time. We do focus them on like specific channels and retailers, but sampling is big. And then, there's also just like how the game works. Promotions, it's like a dirty word in, I feel like, emerging brands. You don't want to promote, and there are a lot of people out there that say you shouldn't have to. It's kind of a faux pas in the early um, emerging consumer brand world, I guess you could say. But you need to promote your product. If you're confident in the repeat, you find ways to invest in the trial. Storytelling, demos and sampling, and promotions were probably the three biggest tactics that we used and still do.
Uh, and then also doing sampling as well.
Yes.
A lot of sampling. Cool.
Also packaging, I think packaging is the biggest asset that you can invest in as an emerging brand. And we didn't always have it just right, but I feel like our packaging works really hard for us today.
Definitely want to dive into packaging, but first, what obviously at this point when you're into these co-ops, or I would think that you're at this point where we got into 20 different co-ops, and you're expanding beyond that. What what was that process like, finding the right co-man to also support you in your business, so it's not just you doing this all alone?
So yeah, so we went from 20 co-ops to regional distributor. Then we brought on Wegmans and grew kind of one store at a time with Wegmans over years. Same thing with Whole Foods in the Northeast. And then we were ready for a co-man. Took years. Okay. And I want to 5-6 years before we were even ready to consider a co-manufacturer. But once we were probably doing about $1 million in business a year, which was tiny for the co-packer that we ended up working with. But it was really important to me as a chef and the founder that I found a co-packer who, number one, could replicate the quality. I was not willing to make any concessions when it came to our process or the quality of the product. Number two, there are things that a co-packer can do for you that give you an outsized advantage as a small company. Sometimes, not all the times. Uh, but we were talking about cash flow before we hopped on here, and our co-packer, after about a year of working with us, became a strategic investor in Ithaca, and with that investment came some some terms in our relationship that allowed us to hold on to our cash for longer. So we didn't have to pay for any inventory, didn't invest in raw materials whatsoever. They invoice us for finished goods once they're, made and packaged and in cases and on pallets. They invoice us with 60-day terms, and then we turn around and sell it on 30-day terms to the first receiver, which gave us a 30-day window of cash flow.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
wow. Yeah, totally. So you actually have like a negative cash flow conversion cycle if I'm understanding correctly.
Exactly, exactly. And that was a big part of the strategic relationship between us and our co-packer was, yes, we'll sell you equity and we'll take some capital for sure, but we also need
Better
um
terms.
yeah, we need better terms. We need better terms in our relationship because we don't want to have to go back out and raise money when we get some big account. Like so many brands have to do that. They've got to go fundraise just to access Walmart or Target because it's so capital intensive to even entertain a piece of business of that size that they can't do it without outside funding.
What do you think that the co-man saw in you all to actually put equity into your company?
Well, the first year that we started working with them, we went from 1 million in revenue to 3.5 million. So that was it. they were like, they were like, okay, yeah, you came to us. You had all these demands on we got to squeeze fresh lemon juice for you. We have to cool down the chickpeas just right before we blend it, and all these little quirky things
And
to
they
them that were like,
accommodated it. Yeah.
yeah, they were like, this guy's a nut. We
But we'll
make
do it.
a bajillion jars of pasta sauce in a minute. And this guy wants to sit us and, one by one at a time, polish off each but they did it. And so I think they had a little bit of confirmation bias working for them, working for me really. And then we went from 1 million to 3.5 million. They're like, okay, product's great. This guy's kind of crazy, but the growth is there. So let's get in on the action.
For you, was it obviously you're you're now at a lot bigger than either of those numbers, but for you, how are you thinking about capacity from your standpoint? Because if a co-man invests in your company, do they have enough? Will they have enough capacity that they can actually support you as you grow, even far beyond 7 figures?
Yeah, I feel because I work with such an amazing co-packer, I feel almost underqualified to even comment on that because, you know, the name of the co-packer, by the way, is Ledestri. All right. The guy who started it, his name's Giovanni Ledestri. He and I are super tight, have been since the beginning. And what he always tells me to this day is like, just don't stop selling. Sell as much as you can. We will never have any capacity constraints that we can't fill for you guys. Like it's such a rare special relationship, and I almost feel like it's unfair to like tell that story to people who might be listening, and I don't want to mislead anyone to think that that's normal. It's not normal. Normally you work with a co-packer who wants you to fund all your raw materials. They've got to show up 6 weeks before they'll even put you on the
Yeah,
schedule.
turnkey.
Then you get like 4 runs a year, so you sit on all this finished goods. Ledestri, they do it our way. They fund everything, and they make product 5 days a week, every week, all week. We're just ching, 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 constantly running. It's always been that way.
Yeah, and that also makes sense because it's perishable and only actually lasts for 21 days. You kind of need to do it like that. You can't really do 4 runs a year, I'd imagine. You have to
Mm-mm.
do it. You have to actually produce lower quantities, but a lot more quickly.
Yes. Very, very difficult to find a fresh manufacturer who can do that for you. Oftentimes, what people do is they'll take some of the process and build their own manufacturing, and maybe like we use HPP for our products, so they'll toll out the HPP, but they'll do the manufacturing in house and do some combination. We've been absolutely blessed that we found Ledestri, and they have it all under one roof, and they make product every single day.
Because you seem obsessive about quality, if that's fair to say, maybe even a maniac about quality. What do you have any horror stories when it comes to actually working, just building the product where the product actually wasn't quite right, or the product didn't go quite where you thought it could? It could even be in product innovation, for example, when you're trying to launch a new product.
Yeah, I mean, if a batch isn't right, we throw it away.
Okay,
Sucks.
plain and simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
straight up. If it doesn't taste right, it doesn't get sold, and that was really painful in the beginning because we made there's money. There's a lot of money to lose. I would say the bigger horror story though for me was just I was self manufacturing for that first 6 years, and man, I had to learn how to use packaging equipment, and we went from like filling with a ice cream scoop to using like a filling line that I bought. And when that filling line went down, we couldn't go back to the old ice cream scoop because the way that it was sealed had to happen on the machine. So I spent so many nights in that factory, like underneath of the machine, trying to troubleshoot and fix it. And that was the nightmare. Those were the nightmare years of like trying to run a manufacturing plant and build a brand at the same time and balance quality. I'm so lucky I found a co-packer that could do all that, because trying to run a plant for me was a nightmare.
Did you also get approached by, VCs or other outside capital institutions when as you were scaling? I mean, I imagine you probably did, but I know that you haven't raised like a formal round of funding with VCs. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how how you thought about fundraising, or even how much to raise? I know you obviously have the raise from the co-packer as well, but your overall kind of philosophy in terms of Ithaca when it comes to on the equity side.
Yeah, and before I launch into it, like this is my experience. Okay, it's not
Yes,
everybody's experience,
no one right away.
but
Yeah.
so yeah, VCs, private equity, reaching out all the time, and it's been like that for a long time. And it's just like I don't even delete. Like I don't even want to talk to them because I am laser focused, maniacal about the fundamentals of the business. I want to be a great operator. I want to build a great business. I do not want to be a professional fundraiser, because once you do that, and I've understood this fortunately from the beginning, once you raise money, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Now you're on someone else's timeline. Now you are chasing growth for growth's sake. Now, you're beholden to someone else's dream for you, and desires for you, and their, LPs and calls and board meetings. I don't have time for it. I don't, that's not what I want to be doing. I never wanted to do that. And fortunately, I was able to make that work by focusing on product quality first and foremost, more than anything else, unit economics. These are the fundamentals, and velocity. Product quality, unit economics, velocity. Focus on those and don't raise money. That was my objective. And fortunately, that worked out, because when we have brought on money and when we have sold equity, it's because someone came to us, like the co-packer, like another strategic that we sold some equity to about a year ago. They came to us. And when they come to you, you sit at a better seat at the negotiation table. You're not out there trying to raise money because you need it and you're desperate. They can smell that a mile away. That's not what I wanted for my brand. I want to write my own story, and I want to keep writing my own story. And my partners know that, and that's why they invested in me and the brand. And so I've been very lucky, but have stayed away from, I don't know, traditional investment, VCs, private equity, all that.
Can you walk us through a little bit about how you think about strategic? Because I do think that many kind of financial institution firms talked about, added value, for example, and being a strategic partner, but it's not quite being. It could mean quite differently, for example, than what strategic is into what an operator thinks of it. So I totally understand in terms of the co-packer how that was strategic. In terms of that, also, obviously, you have a phenomenal relationship with the co-packer, and but also at the same time, it was also strategic from a cash flow perspective too, right? That you were able to have like a negative cash flow conversion cycle. What when you think about strategic in terms of if you were to raise capital, or even on the other, or even the other strategic investor that you're speaking of, that you brought along board, what was it about them that was strategic that was helpful? And two, are there other things that you think are strategic that you don't have that you might be looking for?
Well, I'll tell you what strategic value add is not. And it's not the VC that comes to you and it's like, well, we know this celebrity and we know all these agencies and we work with this brand. And like, lost in the sauce. Like I can tell, like you can just tell that like this was this VC's like management team sitting around a table, like, how can we draw up all these like services that we can pitch to these brands about how we're so strategic? That's not strategic. Strategic is you can, like you said, you can impact my business today without it costing me any more. I'm not going to give you any more equity. I'm not going to turn around and pay some contact that you can introduce me to go out and be an influencer. That's not strategic. Um, it, Ledestri was strategic manufacturing, right? This new investor that we have is a multi-generation, family-owned, privately held billion-dollar brand that's been around for 120 years. That's what you want to surround yourself with, people who have something that you want, and I want Ithaca to be that. I don't want Ithaca to get
Experience.
cut up and sold 10 times, and I want it to be around forever. And so with this new investor, that's what they have. They've got they've built an enduring brand. Ledestri didn't have that. Great on the manufacturing and operation side, but when it comes to how do you build an enduring brand that lasts for generations, this new investor, this new shareholder that we've got is knows how to do that. What do we not have that we could use? I don't think. I mean, we're the operators, so we know how to operate the company. Sales and marketing is kind of our, two of our core competencies at this point. I don't know that there's a whole lot that we need right now, to be honest.
Well, I'm glad you brought up. No, I really appreciate that response. Um, it makes sense in terms of how you describe it from those two different angles, on the manufacturing side, and also just the experience of building, a $1 billion brand and having that by your side. That's amazing. When do you think, there's been a lot of celebrity X brands partnerships, and even co-founding celebrities, co-founding brands. What do you kind of make of it in the world of Ithaca? How do you approach that, or do you stay away from it? What do you think about the relationship between Ithaca and talent celebrity?
Whoop. Never say never, but I don't think we'll ever do that. I don't think that costs a lot for brands to do, and I don't think that cost actually translates to consumer value. I mean, it's a great way to get a lot of eyeballs on your thing, But if it's not actually producing value for the consumer, it feels like a gimmick and it feels like a fad and not a trend. And I try to stay away from fads and move with the trends.
I know you mentioned this at the beginning, and I said we put a pin on it about packaging and the brand itself, Ithaca. When did it make sense for you all to maybe do a packaging refresh, or I know that you said that right now you're very kind of happy with how Ithaca sits when it comes to the brand. I'm sure for many, I mean, I'm sure for many companies, I mean, looking at, Poppy, even what Poppy was at farmers markets, right? Versus now. And you could say that probably around every brand, even if you don't have a name change, just what the branding was, starting off in the farmers market versus now. How did you approach brand in the beginning? And then what kind of changed, and what were some of the design elements that were incorporated in the packaging that you think really help sell the product?
Hmm. Yeah, in the beginning, it was just trying to throw everything out there, the whole kitchen sink. It was like, what do people care about? Do they care that the recipe has Lebanese origin? Do they care that it's got cold pressed lemon juice? Do they care that it's HPP'd? Is it cold crafted? Is it a crafted product? Like, you're just trying to, like, with no data and no real consumer insight, you're just trying to throw stuff out there and hope that your sales go up as a result. Eventually, we moved manufacturing to Ledestri. And the reason why we're in a square package today is because the filling line at Ledestri fills square cups. And it would have cost $70,000 to retool that machine. And no, I'm too scrappy for that. I was like, hey, we're gonna figure out this whole square thing and get excited. Let's get excited, everybody. And we did, and it's been a nice differentiator for us, right? Like, that's not a
Yeah,
normal
totally.
hummus container. And it turned out to be a massive blessing in disguise because now I'll point one other thing out. Like, if you look at this packaging, there's a lot of space compared to like a normal round, skinny hummus container with just that little sticker. It's not a lot of space for branding. We have a ton of brand block here, especially when you stack them up. Like, we get to create this
Yeah.
amazing brand block. And eventually, what I realized was that what was resonating about the Ithaca products with consumers was that we own taste. We own taste. If people want something that's going to give them a flavor experience, they resonate with Ithaca. And so once I had that realization, it just became about, okay, how do we communicate that visually on the front of the packaging? And this Graza SKU is probably not the best example of that. But if you look at all of our other flavors, it's this clean white packaging with high resolution ingredient photographs, like a big purple bulb of garlic or like a lemon sliced in half with a little piece of dill kind of on top of it. And it looks clean and fresh and flavorful. And that's how it tastes. So I think the square is disruptive. The white is disruptive. The ingredient imagery is kind of like it's like a sign of what's to come. When you taste the product, when you see it, you expect it to taste like something. And then when you taste it and actually matches that expectation, it's a great first impression to leave with consumers. So, um, yeah, packaging has been really important for us. And I don't know if we'll do a refresh anytime soon.
Yeah, no, that I also really appreciate you talking about form factor and how that's so critical. I would also just think stacking them side by side, there's not as much wasted space there since it's not circles, it is instead squares. So that's also pretty great. But
True.
no, that's super interesting about form factor. How do you think about launching? I know you have a number of different SKUs now, but what was your approach to actually launching new SKUs and actually bringing out new flavors in hummus?
We want to be unique in a mass market way. So what doesn't exist in the category today? What are the trends telling us about where the consumer is going? And what can we deliver on in terms of taste? Um, and mm, yeah, what's going to work in a we've got a French onion flavor that makes a lot of sense now that we have it, but it was just like it was kind of insane that no one had ever done it before. French onion is one of the most popular dips out there. Hummus is a dip. Like why didn't French onion hummus exist before Ithaca? And it's a phenomenal, like we were really able to deliver on the flavor profile of the dip that you sit around on New Year's Eve and eat with Ruffles potato chips. Like our hummus tastes exactly like that, but it's good for you. So that was an absolute no brainer. Win-win. The Graza that I just showed uh, is really our answer to the whole seed oil debate. So this is a good example of like seeing where the trends are taking consumers. And you know, I don't know where you or your people in your audience fall on that debate. I personally, we use expeller pressed sunflower oil in all of our products. And the last thing that I want to do is like react to what I see as this like pseudo influencer science going on out on the internet and change our products. So instead of doing that, we decided to launch a olive oil and sea salt flavor, which is what the Graza collab is. It's just olive oil, sea salt, tahini, chickpeas, lemon juice, garlic. It's all that's in this. And so for people who want to avoid seed oils, they can buy this. For everybody else, for the rest of us who, you know, honestly, I feel like the oil that we use is super healthy and good for you. There's everything else.
It's a really clever way to get into that market of people that don't that actually don't prescribe to seed oils, thinks that seed oils are evil, and do it with Graza. How did that come about in terms of that actual partnership?
I've known Alan, from one of the co-founders of Graza, for a long time, few years from about the time that he started Graza, and I just knew that in order to pull off this olive oil and sea salt flavor in a big, like press worthy, buzzworthy way, we could pull that off with a solid brand partnership. And Graza is by far the hottest brand in that category right now. We share a lot of the same values and a very similar brand DNA in terms of form factor, like you mentioned earlier. They've been disruptive in their category with the shape and size of their packaging, just like we have, and a very high quality product as well. So I just, when we decided we were going to do the olive oil and sea salt flavor, I gave Alan a call and left it up to fate. Right? It was like, oh, if Alan doesn't want to do it and doesn't like this idea, then we won't do it. But if he does, we're just going to run with this. And luckily, that's how it worked.
That's great. That's great. And again, very also creative way to kind of enter that market, but also do it with a brand that is also extremely well known and also has been growing so quick,
Yeah.
just like you all.
Well, and we don't want to be negative. We don't want to challenge anyone's beliefs about
Hmm.
seed oils. We we
Hmm.
we just we just want to like love olive oil and just be like all
Yeah,
about
let's
olive.
do
That's
it.
great. Like for
Yeah,
sure, we love olive oil, and let's do that in a big, fun and energetic way. And so far, so good. It's working.
I know your goal that you've said for Ithaca is for it to be, around for 100 years or around for a very, very long time, right? That's
Hmm.
part of the reason why you didn't kind of take PE money. You don't want it to get chopped up. You don't want it to. You want Ithaca to be Ithaca. In your mind now, what is what today at least? I know this can change. What is the ultimate goal for Ithaca in terms of strategic acquirer, in terms of or staying independent?
It's for me, the compass is whatever's going to achieve the long-term mission of
Of Ithaca.
keeping Ithaca around and meaning what it was meant to mean, right? Which is taste outside your comfort zone, right? Like do taste something that's going to change your perception of a food that you thought was one thing and now it's something different. And I want it to be a beacon for that. And I want the quality. I want the quality to always stay at the highest level. So whether that's me or my kids one day continuing to pass the torch and carry on the torch, I'm fine with that. Or some strategic coming in and sinking their claws into and making it bigger and better than I could do by myself. I'm fine with that. I just want to know that it's going to that it's durable enough to stand the test of time, if and when that type of a transaction ever happens. And I want to make sure that it goes to a partner that does not have a track record of buying brands and then fucking them up and then selling them, a couple of years later, oftentimes back to the original founder. As much as I would love that for me financially, that'd be great. But that's not my goal. Like I wanted to go somewhere eventually, again, whether that's the next generation of Kirby's, my kids, or whether it's some big strategic that's going to hold on to it and cherish it the way that I have. I want it to go somewhere where it's going to stick around. And the way to do that, okay, the way to do that is not to think about how to sell it. It's not to think about how to pass it down one day. The way to do that is to build the best business that you can 24 hours at a time. Today, what can I do to build Ithaca into the best business possible today? And I just stack days. I just stack up days one after another.
So, of all these different scenarios, the scenario you wouldn't like is if you get acquired by a strategic and 5, 10 years later, Ithaca is not really performing well. And they say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe they overpaid and Chris made so much money on this. But the strategic, it was definitely who got the better end of the stick. It was definitely Chris and his team, not the strategic. That would be like the worst case scenario for you.
I would hate that. I would hate that. No, I wouldn't. If that's what I thought was going to happen, I wouldn't sell it. It's not all about, I mean, you get to a point where it's not about the money, it's about legacy. It's about doing something that you're proud of and that your kids are going to be proud that their dad and their parents did. Money's great, but like you can't buy that. So
Well said. Really well said. I know we don't have that much time left, but I have a quick lightning round if you will, if you would, if you're willing to indulge me.
I love lightning rounds. Let's do it.
Sweet. What is your besides? Well, I guess it's not 5 years old. It's a lot longer. So, your favorite consumer product innovation or brand in the last 5 years?
I love dude wipes.
Dude, it's
I
so
love
good.
the way that they are just so authentically them. I love that brand.
What's a belief you hold that you think is most contrarian from others?
Well, you don't need big outside capital to build something big and meaningful.
What's one of the biggest things you changed your mind on during building Ithaca?
That the best product always wins just because it's the best product. Um, I've come to learn that it's the best product, yes, table stakes, but it's also the best story and the best execution and the best consistency. The product is the entry fee, but it's not the whole game.
Well said. And finally, what's one book that's inspired you personally and one book that's inspired you professionally?
Personally, the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous totally reshaped how I think about money and the history of money and the future of money. I really recommend anybody watching this to stop what you are doing and read the Bitcoin Standard. Even if you don't care about Bitcoin, read the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. Professionally, I would have to say Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Um, Such a great book, just raw and it's honest. There's chaos, there's doubt, there's near death moments Every founder needs to read that book. I think it's the closest thing to a blueprint for resilience.
Well, I'll say this. You're very original because no one has recommended the Bitcoin standard.
Love it.
But at the same time, but at the same time, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight is the most recommended book on this show. So
Probably for a reason.
there we go. Chris, thanks so much for your time, man. This was a lot of fun. There you go.
Yeah, you bet. You bet, man.
Awesome.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Chris, for coming on. I loved hearing the story about Ithaca Hummus. Thank you so much, Highbeam, for being our presenting sponsor. If you're a brand and you need access to flexible credit lines and cards built around your cash cycle, check out highbeam.co. Subscribe to the newsletter. Subscribe to this channel. Thanks so much, everyone.